In a world full of darkness, it's time to let the light shine bright. This is Strength to Overcome, where faith and action help us grow through adversity. G'day everybody, welcome back to the Strength to Overcome podcast. I am Matt Morton, your host, and today I have a very exciting guest. This gentleman and I go back a long way, and I've alluded to this character quite a lot of times over the course of our 10, 11 months here, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on, Aaron. I don't call you that, but Ranch, as I've probably mentioned
I've
you.
never heard you say my name, to be honest. But
Yeah, I kind of paused there a little bit to sort of see which way I wanted to go with it, but we've known each other quite a long time, and it's a thrill to have you on. And I know that we've talked a lot about doing an episode because about 6 or so months ago I reached out to you and wanted to hear about how you were going and what was happening in your life, and you at the time said something's brewing. Give me some time to figure that out, and of course it's taken a little bit longer for us to get here, but I'm absolutely thrilled to hear about what's been going on in your life, and understand a little bit about how at some point you were running the show at KPMG, and now we're going to talk a little bit about what is happening in your life, why you're here, and the Strength to Overcome audience is super pumped to hear about your journey from where you were to where you are now. So thanks for being on, mate.
no, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So walk us through a little bit about the recollection you have of how we met. Let's give people a little bit of a background here, because you, back in 2004-5, I believe, were looking as a teenager to make some changes, and walk us through your recollection of that, not mine.
Yeah, so I would have been, 14, 15 in that in that time frame, and my dad was becoming concerned that maybe I was too much of a couch potato. I don't know that it's not that I was inactive, but had some extra weight on me and was having trouble getting motivated and figuring out kind of how to uh, maybe get in shape to do some of the things I wanted to do. And at the same time, I, you know, uh, was struggling with some confidence. And my dad thought that he had been going to a gym and he had actually, heard your loud motivation and, famous, beloved by Americans Aussie accent. And he had made the connection in his head of, hey, maybe Aaron would, enjoy working out, and that would be something that he could take ownership of. It could become his own. So, I mean, honestly, it's one of those things of my parents pretty much signed me up for personal training sessions. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like against my will. I was, happy to do it. I remember we came in. My only memory, we never met you, and we went in and we were talking with, whatever the kind of administrative staff would have been, and they were going to put me with, I forget who it was, but they probably just did the assignment kind of based on availability or whatever. And and I knew in the back of my mind that my dad had wanted me to request doing it with you because he'd seen you working and thought that'd be a good match. And and I didn't say anything because I was just kind of like, too shy, not gonna rock the boat. And my mom looks at me, she's like, Aaron, do you want to request, Matt? And I said, okay, fine. My dad wants me to work with Matt. So I mean that was the genesis of it. That was at that point, start working together. And yeah, I mean, you can unfold some of it from your end too, even from kind of what you saw in that.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember hearing that story after the fact, and when I look back at some of the things that we were doing after that, we were working on basketball drills, football drills. I mean, we were doing all sorts of different things, and I recall at some point we were down in the basketball court area, and we were working on your hands. Something that you wanted to be able to do was play football, and we came up with this drill where you weren't even looking. If my memory serves me right, you either had your eyes closed or you had your back to me. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Back turn. Yeah.
And I would throw this football, and of course, growing up in Australia, we don't throw it, we kick it, right? So I was throwing these footballs at you as best as I could, and I would yell out, left or right or turn or whatever it looked like. And
Yeah.
I think there might have been a time where I may have forgotten to yell it out. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
yeah, you got out something else in last minute concern, and I spun around, and I think I took it right in the face, to be honest. I mean, it was like because it was a little late on the call, but yeah, I mean, we had a bunch of good drills because I mean, kind of as we evolved and started working through, what are we doing here? Yeah, there are different phases of, oh, I want to try to make the football team, end up not ultimately pursuing that, but that gave us some motivation for a while. And then there's a time where it's like, hey, I want to be a Navy SEAL. I mean, a lot of probably not an unusual aspiration for a lot of young guys. Just the allure of the military, and so training towards some of those specs on that. And there was one of our friends there, you were closer with him, that went into the Navy SEALs, so that I kind of had that too. I was looking towards, and obviously that didn't pan out either. But we just had different phases, and it was just a season of. It was funny, teaching me self discipline, teaching me, oh, I can set a goal and make that goal, teaching me to have a look to get out of my shell a little bit, to have some confidence, and then it kind of in that start to learn how to um, you know figure out, oh, like, oh, I can go work for that and I can go do that. And yeah, I mean, lost a ton of weight. I think it was somewhere around 40 or 50 pounds or something in that range during that those years. And then as that friend, I mean, I'll fast forward here unless you want to slow down on a question, but as I kind of went into college and then adulthood, our friendship just we kept up. Oftentimes at distance, while I was away at college. I'd see you when I came back, and then, yeah, it just kind of turned into then a friendship. Like what started out as just kind of this funny. Uh, we have like 11 or 12 year age gap, something like that, maybe. And what started out as this just kind of random training relationship out of the blue that my dad set up, turned into a friendship. And we've done a lot. We've done a lot together, a lot of stories, a lot of memories. So
We have definitely carved out a lot of history there, and I often tell people there was this particular Monday I showed up back to the gym and I was absolutely livid. I was fired up. I was mad with the world. I'd spent all my money. I'd gone to the slopes, I think West Virginia, maybe snowshoe, and I'd spent the entire weekend, sliding down this mountain on a sheet of plastic trying to figure this out. And I'm athletic, as you know, and, I could do a lot of things fairly quickly. And so the just enormous amount of frustration that I had that I couldn't quite master this. And so you show up for your training session and I start talking to you about it. And I said, man, I spent the whole weekend or the whole day going down. I just couldn't make the turn. I couldn't get my weight in the right positions. I just don't understand what's going on. I was so mad. I remember walking down the slope with my snowboard over my shoulder, just absolutely livid. And you took one look at me and you said, how would you step on a skateboard? And I showed you my stance. And, you probably didn't say it like this, but my recollection of it was something like, you idiot, you're goofy footed. I said,
yeah,
what are you talking about? He goes, you spent the whole weekend going down the mountain in the wrong direction as far as your stance goes. Now, obviously you want to be able to go down both sides, but initially when
yeah,
you're learning, you don't know what you're doing. And so I looked at you, I would have slapped you really because it was so simple. I didn't understand. And if you recall, I remember saying, we're going back next weekend. I'm paying for your lift ticket. I'm paying for your lunch. I'm doing the whole thing. Do you recall this?
yeah. I mean, I now that you say it, I recall the whole goofy foot, regular foot revelation. And then I know we went several times together after that, and you know, I mean, I wouldn't say I taught you, other than you are insanely athletic, and as soon as we fixed the footing, you were pretty fast on it yourself. But yeah, we ended up. I don't know how many times we went, but yeah, we went a good number of times together just for day trips.
Yeah, and it's those sort of memories, where I always tell people you were 12 or 13, maybe a little bit older when we started, but you come up a lot because you're that one person that when I first moved to America, you jumped on board and you saw the vision that I had, and we had a lot of training together, but you also had a lot of fun outside of that, and I think that created a bond where, a little bit later on in our lives, we were both sort of going through a tough time, and you were there for me in a way that I've talked about in some of my early episodes. I think there's definitely some moments there in my dark times where I was up in North California, and there are definitely moments where when I look back on that, had you not been there in the way you were. Now, you weren't living there, of course. You were still in Virginia at the time, but we would talk every night, we would pray every night, and then at one point you did come out and visit me, and I'll say it on the air again now in case I haven't said it for a few episodes, but I will say that without that support, from you and Stretch at the time, I don't know that I'd still be here. I don't know that I would have necessarily done anything intentionally, but your brain really does play tricks on rational thoughts. And I think at the time things were so dark for me going through a divorce. At the time I was still trying to recover from the scabies attack that I'd had from living in Mexico and trying to heal it naturally. There's a couple other stories there we won't get into, but you truly did probably carry me through just by being there on the other side of that phone, pretty much every night. And there was a lot of times that was just deep prayer. There were other times where it was just a phone call straight into prayer and then a hang up. And it needs to go on the record now. I've waited a lot of episodes to say this to your face, but thank you again for that, because without your support through that time, I don't know what it would have looked like. But without you, there's definitely some very dark thoughts there that I would have maybe, allowed to even take me down some dangerous places. So thank you for that. And I just want to make sure that the audience understand who it is that I've got on this episode today, because I almost feel like the Almighty put you in my life at that point, 12, 13 years earlier, just so that at that moment I would have someone that I could trust and believe that the counsel was holy, it was righteous, it was coming from a place of love, because there were times where you would have to call me out on some things too. And so that's who it is that I've got on this episode with us today, folks. And now I want to hear a little bit more about what's been going on in your world for the last 6 months, because for a lot of years you were climbing that corporate ladder. So can you kind of give the audience a little bit of a backdrop on what did that look like first, and then let's segue into what's happened in the last 6 months.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to kind of put it in a concise, interesting way as possible. Basically, coming out of college, I was in the corporate finance accounting world, and I ended up working for KPMG in the audit practice, becoming a CPA in that. And yeah, I mean, in those type of firms, for anyone that's familiar with them, uh, you climb the corporate ladder or you fall off it. I mean, there's no steady state in that. You're either going somewhere or you're not. And I mean, I enjoyed the work, and thanks to many of God's mercies and kindnesses, I was good at the work and really enjoyed my coworkers. But I mean, it was a grind. I was traveling 5 days a week most weeks, and lots of hours. So I spent about um, let's see, I was there almost 10 years in total, working up through till senior manager and kind of I'm skipping a ton of ground here. So Matt, and that if you want to go back on any of this, but, and I'll have to circle back to it on some points later, but it was getting to a point in my life where I was realizing, okay, I'm either all in on this, because in those type of accounting firms, ultimately you become all in. You go try to make partner in that firm, or it's like there's got to be something else. And because of various things in my life, and I'll actually go ahead and just say it. I mean, Matt, you were talking about how I was there for you during your hard time through divorce. I mean, that was reciprocal. I can't remember the exact timing on our differences, but I mean, I went through a divorce in that time frame as well, and we were there really for each other. Those were very mutual phone calls of support and just praying together. And that had been when I was about 6, 7 years into KPMG, and kind of coming out of that, even though I stuck around for a while, I knew in the back of my mind, it's like either I gotta find a way to do what's required at work and do a good job at work, but do so in a different way because it previously it had taken too much of my attention, too much of my time, and not allowed me to do the things that I needed to do in life, whether that be caring for a wife or being part of the church that I want to be part of. So either I got to find a way to make that balance or I need to change. And it just became evident to me through a number of reasons that it was going to have to be a change. And at that time, I realize I'm not telling the most linear of stories here, but
Well, let
10
me
years
pause
into
you there.
taking,
Let me
yeah,
pause you there because, a lot of
yeah,
people probably don't know that timeline, but, I remember it fairly well in that you were definitely a little bit ahead of me in what was happening in your marriage, and the details are nobody else's business. But at the end of the day, I had watched you go from this kid, training at the gym at 13, 14, 15, and we had this relationship, and then you ended up doing community college because it was the smartest thing to do. Even though you're probably one of the smartest human beings I've ever met, you decided, well, that's the smartest play because you can get to where you want to be and save yourself a lot of money, right? So you did that, and it was great to have you locally for those few years outside of school. But then you did move to the college scene, right, as you needed to, and I watched you go from this young, energetic young man that wanted to, like you say, play football or be a Navy SEAL, and then you realize, wow, I'm really smart with numbers and spreadsheets and management, and I'm good with people, and so you went down that path. And so I watched you very closely as a young adult grow into this new role where it really did take your thoughts, your energy, your momentum, and we got to the point where I wanted you to help me run 180 Fitness at the time on the backside, and there'd be weeks where I wouldn't even see you. Now, of course, there were times where you'd be in town and maybe I'd catch you on a Thursday night late, right? You'd kind of wrap up my week for me or something like that. But generally speaking, there would be weeks where I wouldn't see you as you segued
yeah.
into those, travel kind of schedules. And before you know it, I would be thrilled just to see you once a month. Now, as a friend watching that, that's one thing, but as a spouse going through that, trying to figure out, well, where do I fit into this, right? Whether we look at it from your perspective or hers. But walk us through a little bit about that because at some point you did press on, you did keep traveling, you did keep doing that. Do you feel like that was a catalyst for things to fall apart, or is it was inevitable anyway?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, those things are so complex. We had at the literally the beginning of our really in our premarital counseling with the church we had done it with, and this becomes a recurring theme in my story that God has only in some ways recently shown me some of the redemption of it. But we had gotten married under a pastor that just um, to use a phrase that's commonly thrown around in the church world, I would say, spiritual abuse. He just wielded his power in unhealthy ways and put a rift between us that uh, it wasn't directly between us. It was more he had deeply unsettled her heart, and and I was 21 at the time, not as an excuse, but like frontal lobe's not even developed fully. Like I wasn't as in tune with how deeply hurtful and unsettling this process had been at this church that we've been at. um and that really started our marriage off on very, very, very rocky grounds. I mean, I don't exaggerate when I say there was not a day of marriage that was just like happy go lucky before things got hard. I mean, it was the day of marriage that things were hard from the get go. And we tried to work hard to work it out. Um, and we made some necessary changes in terms of where we went to church and whatnot. But when you're trying to work through hard things, and marriage is a hard thing, even if there isn't some sort of rift from the beginning. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the travel just it maybe sounds a little trite to say it this way, but it kills the momentum. I mean, how can you have a relationship when you're only home on the weekends, and when you're exhausted anyways? And then, I mean, I was doing plenty of stupid stuff. I mean, I look back just in the sense of, nothing like, it's not like there was drinking or fighting or yelling or hitting or anything like, I mean, none of that ever occurred in our marriage. But was I an idiot and came home from traveling and wanted to play video games? Oh yeah. You know, and just a lack of understanding what God really required of me and what she needed to pursue in that relationship. So, we were married for almost 5 years, and near the end of that 5 years, I was thinking, oh man, I think things are getting better. I mean, this just shows you how out of touch people can be in relationships. I was thinking things were getting better, but in reality, what was happening is they had just kind of plateaued as friends. We were friends in a house together, but we weren't really husband and wife. And one day I came home from traveling, and she said it was over, and it blew me away. I did not see that coming at all, and not to cast any blame or say anything wrong on her. Um, she wasn't interested in counseling, or she just hit reset on her life, and I tried to pursue in that, but she was not interested in that. So, I mean, laws as they are and whatnot, with no kids, it's a matter of 6 months and it's done, kind of thing. So that was that. But yeah, I mean, it laid me flat. That was really the beginning, or maybe the continuation, but the ramping up of some suffering in my life that God was going to use to change me. So, in that, I remember having some degree of crisis of faith, of going, oh man, this is significant, and this is either going to drive me away from faith or drive me to faith, like deeper into faith. And I expressed that to my parents, I believe. But yeah, God really used that to draw me in, to draw me deeper into both the church, the local body of Christ, but also into His Word, and just having a desire to read His Word more and find comfort in relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And that's something, I mean, that's 5 years into marriage, 5 years into KPMG, 6 years into KPMG. I mean, obviously I stuck around, as I've already said, at KPMG for a while, but in the back of my mind, I always knew I'm not doing that again. And I did, as probably clear from what I've said, maybe not, but I mean, I did get remarried, after several years, and we moved to Charlotte, and I was still working for KPMG, and weren't great. My travel was a little better, but it was just one of those things of, it's like, I'm not doing this again. And if I can't get this to work the way it needs to work, for me to love my wife the way I'm called to love her, then I'm going to have to make a change. And that's really kind of starts to press up there on that 10-year mark of going, okay, it's time for a change here.
So, at what point in that timeline did you start to see the repetition unfolding before you, except this time you had started having kids, right?
Yeah, I think it was, let's see, my first kid was born, I think I had already potentially turned in my notice before he was born. I can't, yeah, my wife would have to tell you the timeline here. Just trying to think off the top of my head. No, he was born, and then I stayed maybe a year or something like that. Whatever it was, tell you how kids, like, with the lack of sleep, you just lose all sense of what years are what. But whatever it was, I mean, having kids, what was starting to have kids was one of the main catalysts of going, yeah, this just isn't happening. In the corporate accounting world, in the audit world, there's a busy season, January to March, pretty much, and you're working 80, 90 hours. And at that point, it's COVID, so I'm working them from home, and I still wasn't seeing my kid. Like, I mean, I'm starting work at 7:30, working till midnight, and like I'm ducking down for dinner, and I can hear him playing, but like I'm back to back Zoom calls because it's COVID and what. I mean, it was just absurd. I was like, no, and I remember just in my mind going, for it always been like, oh, busy season is just a season, but like you have the rest of the year. And then I went, busy season is a quarter of the year. That means for a quarter of my lifetime with my child, I'm not going to see him. Not even counting the rest of the year, which can often get crazy if, special things go on. I was just like, no, that's not happening. I mean, that's just like I can't do that to my wife. I can't do that to my family. And that's when I started to realize like, no, change has got to happen. Even though, I mean, and to put it fairly, that's hard. That's a hard change. You've been climbing the ladder. You see what's ahead, and it's lucrative what's ahead, and it's prestigious, and you desire it. I mean, so it's not quite maybe as easy as I'm painting it, but it was clear. So even though maybe the decision wasn't easy, it was clear that it had to be made.
So what actually took place? I know that I've kind of watched you from the sidelines, always knowing that you were talented enough to do absolutely anything, anywhere, for anybody and make any sort of money. And you've already just mentioned the lucrative side of it, that you were really close to, okay, the next tier or the next, badge on the shirt type of scenario where, okay, so I'm going to really provide. That's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to provide for my family. I'm going to make sure that nobody ever wants, and that's how I'm going to do it. And that's the American model, right? Now, I don't necessarily agree with it, and obviously, there's people out there that do that, and I'm not to say that that's a bad thing to do either, right? Maybe that's all they know, and that's all they're good at, and that's what they're going to do for their family, and that's great. But in your case, you're so talented, you could do anything, anywhere, right? So, what was it that ultimately got you to walk away from what was clearly about to be an absolute, let's call it a cash cow? Now, your time would be gone. You'd never see the kids, but that status and that resume builder was, I mean, staring you in the face. And in this scenario, it was almost like it was a temptation. Again, I'm not saying that that
Mm.
pursuit is evil or it's a sin, but it was something that had happened to you in the past, and this time you've
Yeah.
got kids, right? So, what was it this time that allowed you to be able to walk away? Because by the time you got to this point, you were further up that food chain, you were making more money, the opportunities were getting closer to you. So, I imagine it would have been even harder for you to step away. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of a money standpoint, I remember telling my wife, I said, as we were looking at the change that, about to talk about, said, you realize I'm making the most money that I'll ever make right now, but, with this change that we're about to do. And now, maybe not with inflation the way it works these days, but that's aside. Inflation adjusted. And yeah, I mean, she's a super contented person, so that's a blessing in many ways, but it's a blessing from God that kind of allowed this change. I mean, so what makes that change? I think it's a greater having a greater affection, that goes back to when I started going through suffering and divorce and being pressed into the church and being pressed into pursuing a relationship with God, and my faith was growing. And to someone that doesn't have faith, this might sound weird, it might sound mystic, it might sound abstract, but there's a reality to it, and there's a truth to it of as you as God as you enter into a relationship with God and as you read His Word and begin to know Him more and more, it was a draw for me. I wanted to know God more, and I wanted to shape my life. It got to the point where it's like, whatever career I have, like I've got to have time to pursue God in the significantly. And then it was kind of in that it was like, well, this is just God's timing. Where we were in Charlotte, there was a seminary nearby. There was a good seminary that we liked, that aligned. well with my needs and everything and beliefs. And it was 5 minutes from where we bought a house in Charlotte. I mean, and that was just totally unplanned. And I started to take a class there, and then I took another class, and I realized like, oh, I think this is what God has for me. I think it's not just a change in terms of, a corporate job that's less demanding. It's a change in career where I'm gonna go into the ministry, and at the time it was like, what's that even mean? I can't even envision myself as a pastor. That's weird. I've just never seen that. That's, does it, am I even good at that? Like, just, but it's like, but I want to love God and pursue God as more. Like, I had this like insatiable, just like, I want more of this. And as I started to do that, I wanted other people to experience that. Like, I remember telling my wife, just like the beauty and the glory of God, like the way that he's revealed himself in his word and is revealing himself to me through his word. Like, I want other people to have that. And so, yeah, I started down this journey of, it took 6 years, the end of the last May, so 9 months ago or so, like that, but it took 6 years to get a seminary, a master's of divinity. It's 106 credits, so it's a big master's degree, but, you know, you're doing all sorts of stuff, from learning some of the original languages to, classes on theology to classes on preaching. And it's funny how God had even, God knew this was going to happen. I didn't know this was going to happen. And a lot of my KPMG career actually set me up to do pretty well in seminary. So even just, you're dealing with people and people management and tough issues. Well, I mean, you're going to do great with, or, that's a good skill set to have in ministry. But at KPMG, I was constantly writing these technical accounting memos, trying to figure out like, oh, there's this weird thing that's happened. What's the literature say? How should we understand this? And I mean, that's in a, you know, in a very crude analogy, it's the same thing in scripture. It's okay, well, we have scripture, we have what God says, but how do we apply that to our lives? How's this playing to our lives? So, yeah, I mean, God even had kind of prepared some of my skill set there to be ready to go through seminary.
So you've got this masters because, like I said earlier, you could do anything, anywhere, anytime. And I actually don't know the story. I don't know how this unfolds and what it looks like. So I'm super keen to hear where it goes from here. But you've wrapped up this masters, but within ministry, you could do a lot of different things, right? So what happened next? Where, okay, so you've completed this process, and you know that you're going to head into some form of ministry. What unfolded next? Because the last time I spoke to you, we were in the transition of something big unfolding, and that was probably 5, 6 months ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, just stepping back maybe a year before seminary ended, so about 2.5 years ago, we, were pregnant with now our third child. I'm, working part-time for a church, just kind of like as an intern functionally, which, not to like, this is not um, a bragging point, but there's something very humiliating of going from senior manager on some of like the top jobs on KPMG to intern. You know, and you gotta eat your pride there. And I think the fact that I have to say that shows that I didn't fully eat my pride. But yeah, that was a good irony. So, I'm an intern at a church. I'm working part time still in the accounting world for a small business, and I'm taking seminary classes. And I got 2 kids and a wife, 1 kid on the way. I mean, it was just like a lot. And we realized we need to move back home, move back to Virginia, have some help from family. So we get connected with a church. We move back. That would help kind of take on, let me continue to work in the ministry and get experience while I'm finishing school. And we come back. We have our third kid, and I mean, skipping a lot of details, as the relationship develops with the church, though, they had pretty explicitly up front said, hey, happy to have you come work with us, but like we're not going to hire you. That just wasn't like in their budget and their plan or whatever. Lo and behold, as things start to unfold, as I'm getting near the end of school, they're like, oh, we actually do want to hire you. So they were all set to bring me on as as the second pastor at this church. Um, and then what happened this past summer, and this was kind of right before maybe we last caught up, was as things started to move towards hiring me, there started to be a little bit of tension between me and the current pastor. And I don't, just out of respect for all parties involved here, I'm not going to obviously like unearth a lot of that. But what happened in the end was we had a conversation that resulted in him confessing to significant patterns of sin in his life that disqualified him from ministry, and it was really, I mean, it's quite tragic. Unfortunately, it's something you see in the church, um, but he had to step away from ministry, and it kind of threw me. This was right after I graduated. It threw me just right into the the middle of, oh, now I'm gonna be preaching every week, and I'm gonna be trying to take care of these people and walk them through this. And obviously, we have other leaders in the church, other elders that are shepherding the people through this. And I wasn't officially the guy. It's not like it's not like a you know monarchy where I was the son and I just by divine right inherit the title or something like that. But I was there at that time, and was able to have the privilege of being able to step into that until they figured out what was next. So I mean that's been the last, let's see, I mean it's February right now. That happened back in July. That's been the last 7, 8, 9 months of our lives. Um, and through that, that was just another trial by fire, that like one more thing where it's like, okay, more difficulty in the church. And the church, sadly has this reputation of, oh, it's just full of hypocrites. It's just full of sinners. And, in many ways, yes, it is. And, we're not perfect in the church. In fact, that's kind of why we realize we need a savior, and not to be, too too obnoxious in how I say that, but it is full of sinners, sadly, and sometimes that sin really does manifest in deep, harmful ways, um, as it did here. But because of kind of prior experiences that I'd had, that God, going all the way back to the beginning of my first marriage, God had really been preparing me to be able to kind of be a steady voice in the midst of this difficulty and say, hey, at the end of the day, we're not here because of some human thing. We're not here because we're good at holding ourselves together. We're here because we belong to Christ, and Christ holds us fast. And he's our source of comfort, and he's our source of strength through this trial. So, I mean, the church then had to go through a whole process of finding the next pastor, which was um, quite difficult on us, because it kind of felt like, I mean, it was right. They, it's the right thing for them to do the process rightly, open it up and figure out how they're going to walk through it. But, just from my personal perspective, it's like you propose to someone and they're like, great, let me just hold that. I'm going to go see what's out here, and then come back and let you know the answer. But I mean, that again, just, it was a humbling experience. It was a being brought low of saying, I'm not here for position or title. I'm here to serve these people, and I might pour myself out serving them for the next 6 months, and they might choose someone else. And if that's what God has, and if that's what's good for them, then so be it. I'm going to serve them while I'm here. That isn't how it panned out. It did pan out that at the end of the process, through various candidates and whatnot, they, I was voted and called to be the next pastor. I'm actually going to get installed here in a couple weeks here, just officially as the next pastor. Um, I mean, that's a blessing in so many ways because, uh, it did kind of, we were in a little bit of a position of, you're either hired or you're fired kind of thing. Because just with some of the upheaval and turmoil, it would have been, if another pastor had been called, it would have been like, okay, Aaron, you need to move on. But, so logistically, that's just another blessing where God has provided for us, financially and in terms of friends. We have so many friends here and don't have to sell our house now and, things like that. But it's a huge blessing and an honor just to be able to serve in the church. And yeah, this is what God laid on my heart so many years ago I had some hurt and difficulties in the church. And even through that, and I'd seen, oh, but this is where God's people are, and this is where I want to be, and this is where I want to serve, and God's just walked me to this position. I couldn't have planned this. I couldn't have prepared for the experiences I had to lead to this. But this is what God was preparing me for, and it's just such an honor to be here, to be ready to serve these people and to preach the saving gospel of Jesus Christ.
Well, because I didn't know any of that story, I'm sitting here just, mind blown here again as I hear that you've become the head, is it head pastor? Is that the correct term?
Well, it's solo, so yeah,
Yeah, you're it, right? You're the guy, right?
yeah.
And, as you were sharing that testimony, there have been many times over the years during, good times, quite often, obviously on this podcast, it's strength to overcome. And so we can often find ourselves getting stuck in the mud on, things that are going wrong or the darkest times. But there have been a lot of really exciting and amazing times between us and over the years. And I've definitely always reached out to you when I've got something that I just need someone's really intelligent brain to just look at it from a different angle and articulate it well. And as you were sharing with me just that moment there of you, that realization that I had of, oh, he got it. He got the gig, right? For a lack of a better term, he got the gig. I think back to all the times where I've called you and said, hey, man, I just need another set of eyes on this. I need another thought. I need your perspective on how this is playing out. Can you help me walk through it? And as you were sharing that you got it, I'm like, man, this is one of those very special people in my life where you can live a whole lifetime and you might have a couple of people that you could reach out to at any given moment and say, listen, this is what's going on, this is what's happening, this is how I see it, but if I give you the details, can you kind of help me understand it from maybe a different perspective? And you've always been so good at that. It's a gift. The Almighty has clearly given you that gift. And I remember at the time you would always use your management of your people, your team in the KPMG space, right? You'd be traveling, you'd be going through conflicts, and you'd always lean on it from that perspective. And now I look at it going, well, yeah, I mean, the Almighty set you up. There's nothing you can do about it. He totally set you up with KPMG.
Yeah.
It was also, it looks to me like it was almost like a test where he said, hey, listen, I necessarily don't want anybody to go through a divorce. And I think you and I both had these emotions running through us at times through our divorces where, you're raised in a Christian certain way that you almost feel embarrassed or shamed or guilty or, hey, if you don't make it work, you get divorced, you can't get married again. We've got a lot of that baggage that we've carried with us. But it's almost as if the Almighty said, listen, you need to go through some stuff before I can give you the reins of this flock, right? And so as I look back now knowing the story, it's not lost on me that you went through a divorce. Again, I'm not saying the Almighty created it, but He allowed it to happen so that you could have compassion on others, because I know you and I have at times talked about the challenges that it can weigh on you when you fail in a Christian marriage and it doesn't go the way you think it should. And where was God? Why wasn't He there? How come it fell apart? Didn't I do everything right? Did they not do everything right? We get caught in this right analysis paralysis, and yet now, all these years later of managing people going through a divorce, here you are with 3 kids, wonderful wife, supportive of obviously your journey here, and my heart is absolutely warmed up because now I can look at it and say, wow, I can see it's pretty obvious. Hopefully everybody else could too, but it's clear to me the Almighty allowed you to go through enough stuff so that you aren't this young pastor that people look at and go, oh, you wait till you're my age, or you've never been through a divorce, or whatever the trial, you've never walked away from money and had to, right? It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I may be young, but the Almighty's put me through or allowed me to go through some things, and I chose to overcome those things and come out the other side. So I just kind of now have a little disappointment running through my veins that I can't come and see you preach every week.
Yeah, no, I mean, I echo that sentiment, and I alluded to it at the beginning of our time here. We don't always get to see how, the things that God puts in our lives, how they play out and what God uses it for. I mean, whether we miss it or, whether we just don't see it, we don't see it. But I count myself extremely blessed to have the privilege of, in some ways, I mean, nothing on this side of heaven, like fully redeems the suffering in the sense of I wouldn't wish divorce on anyone, and I wouldn't say like, "Oh, I'll do it again. It'll make me even stronger" or something like. I mean, that'd be foolishness. But yeah, you do get to see how God does work the suffering in our lives to strengthen us, to prepare us, and that nothing's wasted with God. Um, and that's something that we can fall back on in realizing that even in dark moments, and I mean, it hasn't, yeah, like I said, even these last 6 7 months haven't been to use your phrase, rainbows and dolphins. They've been hard. There's been a lot of hardness to these last 6 or 7 months, and even that has been preparing me, and I'm sure God's using that to prepare me to trust him even more each day and not trust my own strength, but trust his goodness and his mercy. And yeah, it's just an extreme honor to be able to sit here and look back at the last really 10 years of my life, particularly, and say lots of hardness, lots of hard things. Didn't even get into the half of it, and but all of it working together for the good.
It's
Uh,
amazing that you just mentioned that strength comes from Him, right? And obviously, there's been some documented changes to this podcast and the way it unfolds, and it's just a blessing to have you on here and share some of this. Can you tell me a time where during this process of you shifting out of corporate, making lots of money and having the title and into this current role that you have, was there a time where you almost went back or you thought, man, I don't want to be a pastor, right? It's kind of like Jonah, right? He doesn't want to go to Nineveh. He doesn't want to deliver the message. I don't want to do that, right? I'm just happy doing my thing. Leave me alone, right? I just let me go back. Let me find a good gig as an accountant. Let me open up a little business on the side here. I can make even more money. And I just don't feel like I'm equipped or I'm not ready. I'm not worthy, right?
yeah.
Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever thought about. I can honestly say I've never thought about going back to public accounting practice. I'm tired just thinking about it. But but yeah, I mean, there's certainly times. Honestly, Mondays are pretty tough days. Uh, you pour a lot out when you preach. It's a lot of emotion. It's a lot of spiritual output, you might say. And Mondays can be pretty dark days that Satan likes to nip at you and you know point out all your flaws and show you how unworthy you are. And yeah, so I've certainly I don't know that there's like a specific crisis moment to point to, but yeah, there's this past year with all the upheaval, with everything going on, there's certainly moments where it's like this could be. I look at my brothers; they're engineers. They're working like 40-hour week max. You know, making good money. I'm like, what? Why did I do this to myself? Like, why did I? Like, why couldn't I have just? I should have just gone and done that, but I had to be different. So and yeah, it's hard, but it does. It casts me. It just um, there's I don't know if you know the name Charles Spurgeon. He's a famous preacher from a while back, and he has this quote, something to this effect of, the waves of this life cast us back onto the rock, which is Christ, and and I think that's what it is and I'm not saying like don't picture me like surfing that wave, like I'm getting thrown back kind of thing. and it's talking with other people and it's having community to speak truth when you forget what truth is. And it's having God's word to remind you of truth when you forget what truth is. I mean, yeah, this is shifting a little from maybe where the question started, but someone said to me very recently that suffering is meant to be a corporate stewardship. And I think that's so true in the sense of, I mean, I couldn't have done this on my own. And I couldn't even, I mean, okay, that you gotta take this with a grain of salt. It's like I couldn't even have done it just me and God. I mean, sure, that could happen, but it's like God puts us around community, and He puts us around people, and He puts us even in churches that are full of hypocrites and sinners. But it's in that corporate stewardship of suffering that we can bear one another's burdens and we can help each other. When I'm feeling that moment of like, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? Why am I should just go be an accountant. I'm still licensed. I still have my CPA. You know, I could go do that. And it just seems like it'd be so much easier. And then you get to talk with people and remember what's true, and you get to remember the God that, you know, you're serving. And in my case, just the extreme privilege of what He's called me to, that I'm so grateful to be here for, of preaching His word every week and caring for His people. And yeah, it's a constant reminder. I think there's seasons of peace in terms of no upheaval, but I think really the season of peace is that even in the midst of suffering and trial, remembering who our God is and that He's there with us and that He's using us. That's really the peace. It's not a peace absent suffering. It's a peace in suffering. And just walking that each week and learning to walk that and have others around you helping you walk it has kind of been what's kept me where I am.
Yeah, I've said this a few times during the course of this podcast where just a wave of warmth and goosebumps has passed over me, and that was a moment right there that's just so beautiful, so powerful, that the peace is not necessarily an absent absence of trial and suffering and persecution or just challenge, but it's being able to stay strong through that process and not lose hope. And that's just a beautiful way to wrap this up. And I've thought long and hard about what would this look like if we ever put an episode together, and the thought of faith over funds, right? FUNDS, right? Not faith over fun, but faith over funds kept running through my brain last night when we organised to be able to get this done today. And it sounds to me like you've definitely picked faith over the funds, and maybe some fun, right? FUN, because the path that you've chosen is by all means not an easy one, and it's going to come with a lot more challenges yet. But I think that the Almighty's prepared you in such a blessing way that whatever comes, you're ready for it. And I'm thankful that you've been able to jump on here. And I know that we've skipped over so much stuff that we did together and some of the fun, but I do really believe that there's a lot of people out there that need to hear this message. And there is one person that I know in particular that would really benefit from this, and just be encouraged with the decision he made to walk away from something similar to what you've described and get into something else where he felt that he was called to do that. And I think something like this, it's not always to turn someone from where they are into something else, but sometimes you've made a decision and you're in it wondering, did I do the right thing? So for all those people out there that are in corporate America or they are chasing hard, how would you like to sign off on to those that are looking for something different? Is there a blueprint that you use? Did you just pray a lot? Did you just feel it within inside of you? What did you finally use to completely surrender that path all the way to the top?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. That's a tough question. Go back. I think some of the big decision makers there were realizing what matters in life, and some of what realizing what matters is when you've lost it before and realizing, oh man, it's worth me losing anything in order to sacrifice what I need to sacrifice for my wife and for my children. Uh, Along with that, in my life, God put stronger call to want to go into the ministry. That's not for everyone. And I honestly don't see my call as like a as like a more righteous or higher call. It's just the route that God directed me on. But God has a lot. You can glorify God in whatever you do when you do it the way He calls you to do it, and He's created it, and He loves it when we go enter into His creation and bring order to it and do it in truth and mercy and in justice. So we can with justice, not injustice. So and you know, we can do that. You can do that as an accountant, you can do it as an engineer, as a janitor, as a mailman. Well, I mean, you can do that wherever God has you. I would just encourage people, you know, it can be such an allure of, oh, just one more year and I'll hit that spot. Just one more year and things will be better. Just one more year. And realizing I'm not sure that year's worth it. If I can't love my wife and love my family, or if I can't serve my community or can't pursue God or do whatever some of these greater things are in life than just our vocation, which is important. But if we can't do these greater things first, then maybe we need a shift in the vocation. And whatever that shift is, I wouldn't sweat it. I would say, what has God gifted you to do? What allows you to make the money you need to support what you need to support? And then go do it. And go do it for His glory. And go have fun and be at peace about it. Like you don't have to read the tea leaves. You know, it's just getting the priorities right and then doing it in a way that glorifies God.
Absolutely beautiful. That's the second wave you've just washed over me, and that's a great way to wrap this thing up. For everybody out there, this is Aaron Kees, one of my very best friends on this earth, and I've just been moved by everything you've said. And I'll talk to you about a few things off the air too that just absolutely crushed me right there. But we'd be here all day if we did that. So, you know, thank you, brother, for being on here. I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to be so blessed by this testimony of yours, and I do appreciate you sharing some of the things that not everybody might know about you and being vulnerable in front of your audience that you are a shepherd to as well. So I praise the Almighty for you being willing to get on here and being a part of this podcast, and I see a bright future for both of us and hopefully in some way together again. And thank you to you for the missus as well and the kids for giving up your valuable time. It means a lot to me, and I think that the Almighty put us together a long, long time ago, even at times I think maybe just for this episode. So thanks, brother. I love you. I miss spending time with you, and hopefully this is just the beginning of us reconnecting on a regular basis.
That's right. Thanks, man.
Appreciate it. All right, guys, Strength to Overcome is wrapping up here. We can put all the stuff in the bottom of it for you to follow, like, subscribe, all the rest of it. And, you know, if you're hearing this, it means that we finally got back on track, and my man here, Ranch, was a huge part of that, and thanks to the Almighty for using him. So, till next week, guys, stay strong. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.